Britain has done something no Western government has dared to do in decades. It dropped a 22 billion pound hammer on the Russian war machine. And almost nobody understood what kind of weapon had just been fired. Downing Street called it a defense support package. But behind closed doors, Whitehall wasn't talking about aid. They were talking about attrition. They were talking about overmatch. They were talking about targeting the only pillars that keep Russia's army breathing: tanks, ammunition, drones, command systems, fuel depots, and the factories that sustain them. For decades, the Kremlin survived on one brutal advantage. It could outproduce, outshell, and outbleed its neighbors because no Western country dared to strike at the entire Russian war ecosystem at once. But what happens when one of NATO's most capable militaries decides that Russia's army shouldn't just be resisted? It should be dismantled? That's what Britain's 22 billion pounds weapons mega program really is. A surgical long-range strike on every layer of the Kremlin's war economy. Storm shadows to gut depots, brimstones to burn armored columns, ASRAAM launchers to shred drones, artillery systems, tank deliveries, industrial partnerships, all designed not just to help Ukraine fight, but to ensure Russia can't rebuild what it loses. It doesn't sound like a geopolitical earthquake until you see what it does. A 100-year defense pact, a permanent weapons production pipeline, a fused UK-Ukraine military-industrial base that locks Britain into the center of Europe's war-fighting future. So why did no one realize that Britain's biggest military investment since the Cold War was actually a direct, systemic attack on Putin's ability to wage war? And if 22 billion pounds in weapons can hit Russia this hard, what happens when the rest of NATO joins in? This is the story of the strike that avoided headlines, but may hurt the Kremlin more than any sanction ever could. Britain's most devastating blow against Russia didn't come from a missile, a tank, or a drone. It came from a ledger. In early 2025, the UK triggered a financial mechanism that flipped the logic of the war upside down. A £2.26 billion loan to Ukraine, fully funded by the profits from Russia's own frozen sovereign assets in the European Union. The mechanism behind it, the G7's ERA scheme, Extraordinary Revenue Acceleration, was intentionally engineered to hit Moscow on two fronts. Financially, by denying Russia all access to the profits from its frozen reserves. Militarily, by funneling those same profits into Ukraine's acquisition of British-designed weapons. And the numbers are cold and precise. The first tranche, £752 million, delivered in March 2025. The next two, identical payments scheduled over the following 2 years. Every pound tied directly to a weapon, a missile, a vehicle, or a system destined for the Ukrainian front. It was a structural trap. Russia will never see this money again, yet it will watch it erode its forces year after year, and London didn't stop there. Parallel to the ERA mechanism, Britain locked in £3 billion per year in military aid until at least 2030 to 31. It's a long-term financing pipeline extending well into the next decade. A guarantee that Ukraine's military capability won't collapse when media attention shifts or political cycles change. When combined with humanitarian support, economic assistance, equipment transfers, training, and industrial partnerships, Britain's total commitment reaches £21.8 to £22 billion, the largest bilateral military package the UK has issued in generations, and the most strategically targeted blow any country has delivered to the Russian state since the invasion began. Putin is watching weapons purchased with his state's seized wealth tear into the army he spent 2 decades rebuilding. To a petrostate rooted in the illusion of economic control, that is more than a defeat. It is humiliation. It tells the Russian elite, your wealth is no longer leverage, it is ammunition for your enemy. This money didn't fund symbolic aid, it paid for the weapons engineered to dismantle Russian battalions. And the first of those weapons, the one that hits Russia in the places it believes are safe, flies hundreds of kilometers behind enemy lines. If you're enjoying this deep dive, please like the video and consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us bring more global insights. Now, back to the video. The most dangerous weapon Britain delivered to Ukraine was not the Challenger tank rolling across the steppe, nor the NLAW buried in a Russian turret. It was a stealth missile fired from hundreds of kilometers away, threading through radar gaps and detonating inside the hardened nerve centers of Russia's occupation force. Storm Shadow wasn't just another long-range missile. It was the first Western system capable of hitting Russia where it believed it was untouchable. Deep rear command hubs, ammunition depots, air bases, naval facilities, and fortified bunkers across occupied territory in Crimea. The impact was immediate. The moment Ukraine fired its first Storm Shadow in 2023, Russia's generals realized their war had entered a different phase. This missile wasn't built to scare them, it was built to decapitate them. Storm Shadow's design explains why Russia has no counter. Range, 250 plus kilometers, with extended performance variants capable of far more depending on release altitude and vector. Warhead, the broach penetrator, a tandem charge system engineered to punch through reinforced concrete, dig into subterranean structures, and detonate with internal overpressure. Flight profile, terrain-hugging, low-altitude cruise using GPS, inertial navigation, terrain mapping, and a terminal infrared seeker that locks onto the target with near-zero margin for error. Speed, over 600 miles per hour, fast enough to compress engagement windows and slow enough to maintain stealth. Russia's most secure sites, bunkers drilled into cliffs, underground command rooms, hardened aircraft shelters, suddenly became vulnerable. And no amount of sandbags or layered concrete could erase the fact that Storm Shadow was designed specifically to break fortified structures apart from the inside. The missile changed the geography of the war. Russian command posts that once operated 80 kilometers behind the front had to relocate hundreds of kilometers further, collapsing coordination. Air bases in Crimea that Russia used for its glide bomb campaign lost jets, fuel, and munitions in a single strike. Ammunition depots that took months to assemble were erased in minutes. The logistics spine of Russia's southern offensive bent under the pressure, and the pressure didn't stop. It supplied continuous shipments throughout 2025, with additional deliveries confirmed for November, exact numbers undisclosed for operational security. Russia knows they keep coming, but not how many or when. That uncertainty alone forces Russian aircraft dispersal, ammunition relocation, and constant infrastructure repair, all draining capacity from the front line. Every Storm Shadow strike has the same strategic effect. Russia's rear command infrastructure becomes a liability instead of an asset. It gave Ukraine the ability to tear into the very organs that keep Russia's invasion alive. If Storm Shadow broke Russia's rear, the next British weapon shattered its armored front. When Britain decided to send Challenger 2 tanks and AS-90 self-propelled howitzers, it wasn't simply filling gaps in Ukraine's armor and artillery, it was injecting a completely different standard of ground warfare, one that Russia had no answer for. The moment Ukrainian crews rolled Challenger 2s into the 2024 Kursk offensive, Moscow realized that its defensive assumptions were wrong. Russian commanders had prepared for Soviet-era armor, predictable maneuvers, and limited fire control systems. They instead faced a tank that combined advanced thermal imaging, long-range gunnery accuracy, and armor designed to absorb hits that would tear through most Western or Russian vehicles. Challenger 2s weren't deployed in large numbers, just 14 tanks, but their presence mattered far beyond quantity. They acted as spearheads, breaching fortified lines where Soviet vehicles would have been obliterated. Their mobility and protection enabled Ukrainian units to advance into Russian territory for the first time since World War II. But Britain's most decisive ground contribution wasn't the tank. It was the AS-91 55mm howitzer system paired with British-style artillery doctrine. The AS-90's advantages were immediate. Superior accuracy from modern fire control computers, fast burst mode, 3 rounds in 10 seconds, enabling shock strikes, rapid repositioning to evade counter-battery fire, extended range with base bleed munitions, and digital navigation and ballistic systems far ahead of Soviet-era guns. Russia's artillery arm, once its greatest battlefield advantage, started losing duels it historically dominated. Ukrainian gunners reported that AS-90s could engage, fire, and relocate before Russian batteries even calculated coordinates. And by 2025, Britain delivered all 99 remaining AS-90 units, transferring an entire capability to Ukraine and closing a chapter of British artillery history to open a new one in 2025 Ukraine's favor. The impact was structural. Russia's ability to maneuver its armored formations collapsed. By autumn 2024, Ukrainian brigades using British systems showed a consistent pattern. They advanced. Russian units retreated. Russian armor burned. Artillery duels shifted decisively. And the front line no longer behaved like the static trench grid Moscow had tried to impose. But Russia didn't lose tanks because of tanks. It lost tanks because Britain supplied Ukraine with the weapon designed to kill them in ways Russian armor was never built to withstand. Russia entered the war believing its armor would dictate the ground campaign. What it didn't expect was a British shoulder-fired weapon that could erase a main battle tank with a single strike. and do it from a trench, a rooftop, or the back seat of a moving vehicle. The NLAW, Next Generation Light, anti-tank weapon, is small enough for a single soldier to carry, but its impact on the war was outsized. Britain delivered more than 12,000 of them, a quantity large enough to saturate every frontline brigade and every urban defense sector before Russia's full-scale invasion began. In January 2022, while most Western governments were still debating Moscow's intentions, Britain quietly flew thousands of NLAWs into Ukraine. Those shipments ensured that when Russia's tanks crossed the border in February, they drove straight into kill zones already prepared with British weapons designed specifically to target their weakest point, the roof of the turret. The NLAW's top attack system is the reason it became one of the most feared weapons on the battlefield. Unlike traditional anti-tank missiles that aim for the front or sides, the NLAW flies roughly 1 meter above the target and triggers a downward-facing shaped charge directly into the tank's thinnest armor. Russian T-72s, T-80s, and even T-90s have roof protection measured in millimeters, not hundreds. And the result? Catastrophic kill probability. Ukrainian forces used NLAWs to ambush advancing columns, block flanking maneuvers, and cripple Russia's initial blitz. Russian crews reported abandoning vehicles at the first sign of an NLAW launch. Tank commanders became reluctant to push forward into urban areas where every basement window and rooftop could hide a missile operator. The numbers tell the story with brutal clarity. NLAWs are believed to be responsible for 30 to 40% of Russia's total tank losses. Thousands of Russian armored vehicles were destroyed, disabled, or abandoned because Britain supplied the one weapon that Russia had no immediate counter for. By the end, Russian armored doctrine was shattered. Crews refused to advance without infantry screens. Convoys halted at the sight of destroyed columns ahead. Armor formations became slower, more cautious, easier to target with artillery and drones. It supplied the weapon that stripped Russia's invasion of its armored momentum and collapsed its confidence in offensive maneuver. Once Russia's armor was exposed, the next fight moved to the sky, and Britain delivered the systems that denied Russia the airspace it thought it controlled. Russia did not expect to lose the skies. Its early war strategy depended on helicopter dominance, drone surveillance, and the ability to harass Ukrainian positions from above with near impunity. Britain dismantled that advantage with a set of air defense systems designed to punish any Russian aircraft that ventured too close. The first shot came in March 2022, when Britain delivered the Starstreak high-velocity missile system, the fastest short-range air defense weapon in the world. It is a Mach 3 plus triple dart kill vehicle fired from a single booster that splits into 3 tungsten penetrators traveling at hypersonic speed. Each dart tracks the target independently, making evasive maneuvers almost useless. A pilot can dodge 1 projectile. No one dodges 3. Within weeks, Ukrainian operators used Starstreak to cut a Russian Mi-28 attack helicopter cleanly in half, the first confirmed kill of its kind. Footage of the strike flashes by in a single second. Target acquisition, laser guidance, darts released, aircraft obliterated. That moment alone forced Russian helicopter crews to rethink every low-altitude mission. But Britain didn't rely on a single system. It followed Starstreak with a massive supply of Martlet or lightweight multi-role missiles, a versatile missile with dual-mode guidance capable of hitting fast, maneuvering aerial targets. By 2025, Britain committed 5,000 Martlet missiles, one of the largest short-range air defense contributions from any nation in the war. Martlet's operational advantages were exactly what Ukraine needed. 6 to 8 kilometer engagement range, Mach 1.5 speed, laser beam riding, plus infrared seeker, 3 kilogram fragmentation warhead, high precision against drones, helicopters, and loitering munitions. Ukrainian forces used Martlet to tear down Russian Orlan-10 reconnaissance drones, Lancet kamikaze drones, and even Kol-52 Alligator attack helicopters, some of Russia's most advanced rotary wing platforms. Denying Russia the sky created a new opportunity. Precision strikes from unexpected directions, delivered by weapons designed to hunt moving targets and erase Russia's logistical advantage. The Brimstone missile is one of the most precise anti-armor weapons in the world. Designed originally for fast jets, it combines millimeter-wave radar with a semi-active laser seeker, giving it a lethal versatility no Russian system can match. Once airborne, Brimstone can identify targets autonomously, filter out decoys, and pick off high-value vehicles even inside dense formations. Ukraine turned Brimstone into something even more dangerous, a ground-launched precision strike weapon mounted on improvised truck platforms. This adaptation, a product of British engineering paired with Ukrainian battlefield ingenuity, allowed frontline units to fire Brimstones from concealed positions, reposition instantly, and hit Russian armor far beyond the reach of conventional anti-tank missiles. Russian convoys that once relied on speed and armor to push through Ukrainian lines suddenly found themselves hunted from distances where retaliation was impossible. Brimstone's impact was brutal. Brimstone 1, 12 to 20 kilometers range. Brimstone 2, up to 40 to 60 kilometers with dual mode guidance. Speed, over 450 meters per second. Warhead, tandem charge capable of shredding armor and disabling tracked vehicles. These missiles targeted the systems that keep armies moving: fuel trucks, ammunition carriers, command vehicles, bridging equipment. Every destroyed logistics vehicle forced Russia to slow its advance, reroute supplies, and expose more assets to Ukrainian fire. By 2024 and 2025, thousands of Russian vehicles had been hit, not by massed artillery fire, but by dozens of well-coordinated precision Brimstone strikes that hollowed out Russia's mobility. The more Russia tried to disperse its columns, the easier they were to isolate and destroy. The more it clustered them for protection, the more devastating Brimstone's radar seeker became. Russia found itself paralyzed not by the size of Ukraine's army, but by the accuracy of its strikes. Even when Russia pushed new armored units into the field, they were hit long before reaching combat positions. Fuel lines were severed, ammunition stocks detonated, mobile command posts reduced to burned-out shells, but the battlefield's most decisive transformations didn't come from missiles. It came from drones, the one domain where Britain enabled Ukraine to scale faster than Russia could replace what it lost. Britain's most disruptive contribution to the modern battlefield wasn't a tank, a missile, or a gun system. It was scale, industrial-scale autonomy. The UK made a strategic bet that the war's center of gravity had shifted from artillery duels to drone saturation, and then it moved faster than any other nation to exploit it. The £350 million British drone initiative is unlike any drone package Ukraine has received. It is designed to deliver 100,000 UAVs by 2026, enough to rewire the entire logic of the front line. The speed of execution shocked even Ukraine's own defense ministry. By October 2025, the UK had delivered 85,000 drones in 6 months, creating the largest single drone supply surge of the war. No other Western ally matched that scale or tempo, and the impact was strategic. FPV drones became the #1 killer on the front line, surpassing artillery for the first time in modern warfare. British-funded FPVs targeted Russian armor, trenches, electronic warfare stations, and logistics vehicles with accuracy that artillery could not replicate. Ukrainian operators mounted anti-tank charges on 300-pound drones and used them to destroy vehicles worth millions. Russia was forced to disperse its formations, hide its armor indoors, and burn through electronic warfare resources it could not replace. But the real shift came from Britain's emphasis on interceptor drones. Over 35,000 interceptor systems were pushed into Ukraine's air defense grid, designed to hunt and destroy Russian Shahed drones, cruise missiles, and reconnaissance UAVs. This dramatically cut the efficiency of Russia's long-range strike campaign. Shaheds that once penetrated deep into Ukrainian cities began falling earlier, often destroyed before reaching their intended routes. Britain then pushed the battlefield forward again through Project Octopus, a joint UK to Ukraine drone manufacturing partnership that produces advanced interceptors and attack drones in both countries. British technology, Ukrainian battlefield innovation, and shared IP mean Ukraine no longer depends solely on foreign shipments. For the first time, Ukraine and the UK are building the same drones, using the same standards, for the same mission, neutralizing Russian aerial threats and overwhelming Russian positions. The effect is cumulative and relentless. Russia's drone reconnaissance windows collapsed, its armored movements became visible within minutes, supply lines became nearly impossible to hide. Electronic warfare systems were forced into constant operation, increasing failure rates. Every day, hundreds of British-funded drones hit Russian positions, forcing Moscow to burn through reserves faster than it can rebuild them. And unlike artillery shells or missiles, drones can be produced at scale, modified rapidly, and deployed instantly. Britain understood that the side controlling the drone economy would control the war's pace, and Ukraine is now operating at a tempo Russia cannot match. Hardware alone isn't enough. Britain also rebuilt Ukraine's army. Long before Storm Shadows hit command bunkers or FPVs hunted armor, the UK was rebuilding Ukraine's fighting force from the ground up through Operation Interflex, the largest British military training program since World War II. Over 56,000 Ukrainian soldiers have completed the UK's 5-week intensive course, a program designed not merely to teach skills but to shape battlefield instincts. Each rotation covers the fundamentals of modern warfare: advanced weapons handling, trench and urban combat, battlefield first aid, small unit tactics, night operations, clearing fortified positions moving under drone surveillance, and, increasingly, demining, one of the war's deadliest tasks. The curriculum reflects lessons from British operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, and the Balkans, adapted for a battlefield where drones, artillery, and electronic warfare define survival. New recruits, who once had minimal training, now return to the front with professional, coordinated discipline, the kind Russia lost decades ago. Operation Interflex is not a purely British endeavor either. It now includes 13 partner nations, all working under British command at training sites across the UK. Canada, Australia, the Nordics, the Baltics, and several NATO allies are embedded alongside British instructors, creating one of the most multinational training efforts in modern European history. Ukraine's most effective brigades, the units that have executed complex counteroffensives and held difficult sectors, almost all passed through Interflex. The UK committed £247 million for 2025 alone, ensuring the program doesn't shrink as the war drags on. British officers have already expanded modules to include counter-drone tactics, electronic warfare avoidance, casualty evacuation under fire, and combined arms integration with NATO equipment. The effect is visible at every front line. Ukrainian units operate with tighter discipline, faster reaction times, and more efficient coordination. Their squads move like Western-trained forces, not conscript formations. Russian units, often staffed with mobilized men given minimal instruction, struggle to match the cohesion and survivability of these British-trained soldiers. This training pipeline is a force multiplier. Every 5 weeks, another wave of soldiers arrives on the battlefield with modern skills, sharpening Ukraine's combat power even when equipment losses occur. It creates continuity, a rotating pool of trained fighters who can integrate new weapons, tactics, and technologies with minimal adaptation time. In January 2025, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and President Volodymyr Zelensky signed the 100-year partnership agreement, the most ambitious defense pact the UK has entered with any nation outside NATO. It was a binding, long-term security architecture designed to lock British and Ukrainian military power together for generations. The treaty delivered a clear message: Ukraine's survival is a permanent British interest. The partnership reaches far beyond annual aid packages. At its core is a plan to integrate both countries' immense defense industries, joint production lines for artillery, air defense systems, drones, and armored vehicles, Program Lyra, a technology-sharing framework enabling co-development of next-generation weapons cross-border manufacturing. With Ukrainian drone companies building facilities in the UK, and British defense firms opening production hubs in Ukraine, shared intellectual property, allowing both nations to iterate and scale weapons without political delay. Ukrainian companies are already moving into Britain. Ukrspec Systems, one of Ukraine's leading drone manufacturers, is building 2 new British facilities worth £200 million, creating 500 high-skilled jobs and embedding Ukrainian battlefield innovation directly into the UK's defense industrial base. British giants are moving the opposite direction. BAE Systems established its own Ukrainian entity to handle maintenance, repair, and overhaul of battlefield equipment inside Ukraine, reducing downtime, shortening logistics chains, and ensuring Ukrainian units can keep British-made armor and artillery in the fight longer. The partnership doesn't stop at industry. It extends into real-time intelligence sharing, maritime security coordination in the Baltic, Black Sea, and Sea of Azov, joint training initiatives, cyber defense, integration, logistical basing agreements that could one day see British equipment stockpiled on Ukrainian soil. And perhaps most importantly, the treaty locks Britain into Ukraine's NATO trajectory. It provides the modernization steps, standards, and institutional alignment required for Ukraine to meet alliance criteria, effectively placing Ukraine inside the Western security system even before official membership. This is not a temporary alignment. This is the integration of 2 defense ecosystems into a single, mutually reinforcing structure. The 100-year partnership ensures that Ukraine emerges from the war with something Russia cannot match, an industrial, technological, and military alliance with a top-tier Western power committed to its security for decades. This isn't assistance anymore. It's a reconfiguration of Europe's military landscape. So now the final questions hang in the air. If one country can hit Russia this hard with £22 billion, what happens when others follow? How much of Russia's future disappears once multiple nations weaponize frozen Russian assets? And when Ukraine becomes a permanent, heavily armed, British-backed fortress on Russia's border, what leverage will the Kremlin have left? The answers are already emerging on the battlefield, and none of them favor Moscow. If you found this analysis valuable, please consider subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into geopolitics. We would love to hear your thoughts. Drop your comments below and let us know what you think. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.